everything looks good with the well, the width. As you can see, we have a problem with the width. It's not it doesn't have like a limit to 1100 pixel, so let's fix that. Remember that in order for this container elements to have a max width, let me make this a little bit bigger so that I can see. So we need, according to the plan, to have all these sections inside the main, like header and main and footer areas, to have a max width of 1100 pixel. That's why we created these orange containers, so that we can contain our content within the borders of this, within the limits of this max width. So this is easy. I just forgot to go inside the container, and I'm going to go find the container. I will just add an outline 2 pixel solid orange to remember why we created these containers. So just like in our diagram, in our plan, we created these containers so that we can limit them to have a maximum width of 1100 pixels. So right now I can just add a max width to 100,000 pixels. So you can see that now I have you can see that my the width of these containers is limited, is to 1100 pixels. The only problem is that these containers are now aligned to the left. There's an easy solution to this. We can set up the margin of these containers. So let me use the inspector here to show it to you. So these containers, will go and open up a container. Let me see if I can. So by default, a container, like a block element, takes up like the whole, takes up a new line and takes up the full width of its container parent. So in this case, this div is inside the header. The header, as you can see, spans the full width of the screen. So this div will actually take, if I remove the max width, this div will take like the whole space. If we set the height, the width of the block element, or even of a display flex element, either display block or display flex, to be a width less than the total width of the container element, there's an extra space left right here, and we can use this extra space to say to CSS, you know, I want you to take this extra space and make it so that it fits at the right and the left side of the margin. So take this extra space and turn it into the element's margin. At this point, you can see the div doesn't have any margin, right, on the left and on the right, top and the bottom. We can take this extra space and split it into two and set it to have like to have 50% of this extra space applied to the margin left, and then an extra the other 50% of the extra space applied to the margin right. How we can do this? We can select the element and we can set the margin left to auto. This will take up all the extra space and turn it into a margin left. So if I go to compute it, you will see that right now all the extra space has been turned into the margin of this element. If I use the margin right with auto, it will take up the available space, split it in half, and give 50% to the left margin and 50% to the right margin. So by using margin left and right auto, or I can use the shorthand margin, which is 0 for top and bottom, and auto for left and right, I can get the same effect. So if I use this margin 0 auto or margin left, margin right auto to these containers, I will center them at the like horizontally. So let's do that. Let me just move this element. Okay. Let me move this to the right side and just move this right here. So I will refresh. Right now they are aligned to the left, they have some space. I will change the max width to 900 just to make it a little bit more visible. We're going to have some spacing issues here, but we will change that back to 900. So in the container, I'm going to add a margin 0 auto. Now they are centered. I'm going to set this back to 1100 so we can have enough space for our content. And I believe we have a problem with this element. For some reason this doesn't seem to be aligned correctly. So let's go and find out what is happening with this element. This is in the main area, and this is this section here. So we have the container, and even though the container has a max width and it has a margin 0 auto, it doesn't get to the right side. So in order to do that, I have to debug the problem. I will use the inspector. I will go to inspect this element and see what's happening. So I have this element, and I see that it has like a top and bottom margin, but it doesn't have any left or right margin. The container that uses margin 0 auto for some reason doesn't apply the settings. So I will scroll down to see what's happening, and you will see that the margin 0 auto on the container has been struck through. This means that this has been overridden by another property. So something else is like overriding this setting, and this is all about specificity. So as you can see, the element has an ID which has a higher specificity, a higher priority over applying some CSS rules. There's also a margin here which sets up a different margin for the left and right. It sets the top and bottom to be 3 REMs, and for some reason we decided to get rid of the left and right margins. So this margin 3 REMs 0 is overriding this margin 0 auto. A quick fix that we can do is we can just change the 0 to auto for this one, and then we can just get the setting that we want. Another thing would be to set this to important, so it takes up like a higher precedence from other like elements, like from other like selectors. But as you can see, if I set this to important, it will override the game desk ID, and it will also get rid of the top and bottom margins which we need. So instead of setting this to important, instead of fixing this here, and I'm going to find the game desk ID for this element, so game screen, game desk, and just switch from margin 3rem 0 to 3rem auto, and this will give me my my styling. Now I can get rid of the container helper like outline. So let me go to the container and I will remove this, and now I have like my content. Now the problem at this point is that there's something happening with this with the spacing here. So let's see, there is no space between, and that's because the image is a little bit larger on this screen. So maybe here, I'm not sure, it looks that there's enough space in here. Let me zoom out. So we have to see why this is happening. I will just inspect these elements and see we have this container. It has these two sections. So the problem is that the image has like kind of like a big it's wide and it takes up a lot of space. So one thing that we can do to fix this is to reduce the size of the image. So I can select the image here, try some things in the inspector, and then go into the CSS and update it. So instead of having the default width, which is the total width of the image, which is 742 pixels, as you can see, I can set something like, for example, 50% of the container element, or I don't know, like 70%, or something like that. So instead of just going 100%, I can go to something like maybe, I don't know, 90%, or I would say by looking at the here at the mockup, I can say that probably this is kind of like more close to like 70% of the total width, and this is 30%. So I can use like some relative percentages to set the width of this element to be 70% of the container element, and this to be like 30%. So I can go here, I can say, okay, let's make this 70%. Let me see. Yeah, this, of course, so if I set this 70%, it will take up the 70% relative to its container element, which is the game screen. And the game screen, of course, takes the available space that it needs to fit the content. So this won't work. So let's see what other things we have we can use. So the width at this point doesn't really work for us, because at least the width will be relative to the to this section, and not to the container section that contains both the features and the image. So I can either play around with like something like this, 95%, or maybe I can use I can add some padding to the right and see whether that will you know, do something. So you can see the padding right is adding space inside the image content, so that's not what we can like we need to do. Also, let me try out the margin. You can see that also the margin adds some space. Now this looks a little bit closer to what we want. So we have an image that's large and takes up a lot of space, but at least we have some spacing here. So without the margin right, which is the space outside of the content, we have these two very, very close together. With a margin, we get something that's closer to the mockup. So I can use this margin with, let's say, 2 REMs on my game screen image. So let's go here and add this margin right. This is how we can understand like better the difference between the spacing, which is the padding, which is the spacing outside of the content, and the margin, which is the space outside of the border. So and maybe, you know, I can just make the width of the image, you know, a little bit, I don't know, smaller, or something like that. But I will keep it like this. Let's see what happens. Some minor tweaks that we can do just to fix this issue. I'm not going to change this. I'm going to leave it like this. But there's some tweaks that we can do. One last thing I want to show you is that we can take these sections, these two sections, and apply some relative width to them. So if I don't want like the default width applied to them by the CSS engine, I can get to the selector, to the container selector, make sure that it's like a flex, and then in here I want to change the width explicitly. So I will go to the game screen, and I will set this to 70%. Let me see, 70%. Okay, so, and let me give it like a an outline just to see it. So I will set the height of this section to 70%, so which means 70% of the container, and I will set the width of this to 30%, you will see that this won't work. So the game features with 30%, and once again an outline of 4 pixels solid orange. So we have 70% here and 30% here, but we do have this space. So I'm going to make this change the space to something like, I don't know, like 68% to compensate for the space between them. So there are different ways that we can tweak our layout using Flexbox and the width. So if I wanted to use like relative units and have like some specific width for this section and for this section, I would start with like 70% here, 30%, and then play around with the spacing between them. Either I can use the flex gap. You can see there's already a gap there. I could probably use some margin and tweak this to have exactly the look and feel I want. But I will leave it like this.